The princess beheld the human warrior and pleaded with her father. Not him, the kingdom of Liorna was a place of grand splendor, where towering cities stretched into the clouds, and the skies above were filled with starships that glittered like diamonds. The Althorians, the species that ruled this vast empire, were known throughout the galaxy for their strength, their wisdom, and their near immortality. They were an ancient race, one that had conquered countless worlds and seen empires rise and fall. At the heart of this mighty empire was Princess Ilaria. She was young, but her beauty and intellect had already earned her a place among the most powerful rulers in the galaxy. The people loved her, but none more than her father, King Aris. He had raised her to be a symbol of Althorian grace and power, the future of their people. Yet, in the back of his mind, he knew that the galaxy was changing. The Althorians were beginning to feel the pressure of new, rising forces from beyond their borders. He had to find a way to ensure the survival of his empire. One day, a new kind of warrior arrived on their planet. His name was Jace Hale. He was not like the mighty Althorians. He was human. His species was known across the galaxy, but not in the way the Althorians were. Humans were from a harsh world, a planet called Earth. It was a place filled with danger and chaos, where survival was never guaranteed. Their technology was nothing compared to the Althorians' advanced civilization, and their species was much weaker physically. But there was something about humans that intrigued many. Jace Hale was brought to Liorna as a potential ally, a warrior who had fought in battles across countless planets, known for his brutal combat style. He had earned a reputation, and that reputation had reached the ears of King Aris. The king needed an ally, someone who could fight for his people, someone who could prove his strength in the arena of power, and that's why Jace was invited. But the moment Jace stepped into the royal court, Princess Ilaria was unsettled. She had heard the rumors about him, about how humans were fierce in combat and how Jace was unlike any other human. But seeing him in person was different. Jace wasn't tall like the Althorians, nor was he built like a mighty warrior. He was average in height, with a strong yet unremarkable frame. His hair was short and dark, and his eyes were sharp, eyes that spoke of a life full of hardship. His face, though plain, had a certain calmness about it, a quiet confidence that made him stand out. He was not the type of warrior Ilaria had expected. As she sat in the royal gallery with her father, watching Jace step into the grand hall, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. His presence was not what she had imagined. The Althorians were used to grandeur, thick, shining armor, great displays of strength, and warriors who struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. But Jace was different. His gaze was steady, calm, almost as though he had seen everything the universe had to offer, and nothing could shock him anymore. The court murmured as the human stood before King Aris, a simple figure among towering figures of gold and silver. Ilaria could see the judgment in the eyes of her people. Why had her father brought such a warrior to their home? Was he truly worthy of their time, their trust? King Aris, however, seemed unbothered by the whispers. He had seen something in Jace, something that made him believe the human warrior could offer something the Althorians could not. But Ilaria was not convinced. She did not trust this man who appeared so ordinary, yet had somehow earned the right to stand before them. "Jace Hale," King Aris said, his voice booming through the hall. "You have come to offer your services to our empire. We will see if you are worthy of the Althorian name. A warrior's challenge awaits." Ilaria frowned. Her father was a man of logic and strength, but sometimes his need to test everything, to push others to their limits, left little room for doubt. She feared that Jace might be too different, too unpredictable. What if this warrior's way was not the right one for her people? What if his ways would bring trouble to Liorna? "Father," she said, stepping forward, her voice soft but filled with concern. "Please reconsider. He is human. His kind is not built for the challenges of the arena. We cannot trust them as we do our own people." King Aris looked at his daughter, his expression unreadable. "Ilaria, we cannot afford to be weak. The galaxy is shifting, and if we are to survive, we must adapt. This human warrior may be the key to a future we do not yet understand." Ilaria's heart sank as her father's words settled in her chest. She knew he was right in one way. The galaxy was changing. The Althorians were not the unstoppable force they once were. Other races, other species were rising in power. The Ancient Ones had grown too complacent, too focused on their own superiority. And now they were beginning to feel the pressure. But still, she could not shake the doubt that had settled in her mind. Jace was not like the others. He was not the type of warrior they had always known, proud, powerful, and certain. He was quiet, reserved. He did not speak much of his past, but there was something in the way he moved, the way he carried himself, that made Ilaria feel a deep, unsettling uncertainty. The human warrior was taken to the arena the next day, and the Althorian people gathered to watch. The challenge would be a test of strength, skill, and survival. In the arena, warriors fought to the death, and only the strongest emerged victorious. It was a brutal tradition, but one that had shaped the Althorians for centuries. It was the way things were done. Ilaria stood at the royal balcony, her father beside her, as the crowd below roared with excitement. The first challenge was set. Jace stood at one end of the arena, his simple clothing contrasting sharply with the elaborate armor worn by his opponents. The Althorian warriors were already prepared for the battle, their weapons drawn and their eyes filled with confidence. Ilaria couldn't take her eyes off Jace. He stood so calmly in the face of the roaring crowd, as if he didn't care about the eyes upon him, as if he didn't care about the expectations placed on him. Was he truly fearless, or was there something more behind his quiet demeanor? "Do you think he can win?" Ilaria asked her father, though her voice was filled with doubt. "Time will tell," King Aris replied, his gaze fixed on the arena. "But if he does, we will have an ally like no other." As the battle began, Ilaria's heart raced. She watched as Jace moved with precision, his every movement calculated and sharp. He was not the strongest in the arena, not by far. His opponents were towering giants, their strength enough to shake the ground. But Jace had something they did not. He had strategy. He knew how to read his enemies, how to predict their moves, how to use his surroundings to his advantage. The first challenger fell quickly, then another and another. With each victory, Ilaria's unease grew. This was not the kind of fight she had imagined. It was not about raw strength. It was about something deeper, something far more unsettling. And with each opponent Jace defeated, her father's smile grew wider and the crowd's cheers grew louder. Ilaria's thoughts were a storm. She had been wrong to doubt him. This human was not just an ordinary warrior. He was something else. He was a force that could change everything. But as the final challenge approached, Ilaria found herself unsure whether she wanted him to win or lose. She did not know what this victory would mean, for Jace, for her, or for the future of Liorna. The next day, the final match was set, and in her heart, Princess Ilaria knew that this human warrior might just be the one to shape their future. But could she truly trust him? Would his victory be a blessing or a curse? The next day arrived quickly, and the people of Liorna filled the grand arena once more, eager for the final battle. Princess Ilaria stood at the royal balcony with her father, King Aris. The air was thick with tension, the entire city watching as a human warrior, Jace Hale, prepared for the final test. Ilaria's heart raced. Yesterday, she had watched Jace fight with a calm precision that was unlike anything she had ever seen. He was not the strongest in the traditional sense. His frame was smaller compared to the mighty Althorian warriors, and yet he had defeated every challenger with ease. His every move seemed to be carefully thought out, every strike perfectly timed. The humans, Ilaria had heard, were not known for their strength, but for their cleverness. And now, in front of an entire galaxy of spectators, Jace would face the mightiest of the Althorians, Prince Thraxos. Prince Thraxos was the champion of Liorna, and his victories in the arena were the stuff of legend. No warrior had ever come close to defeating him. His towering frame, his unyielding strength, and his unmatched skill in combat made him an icon. He was everything the Althorians valued in a warrior, powerful, fierce, and proud. He was the very image of what the people expected in their champions. And now, he was about to face a human, a being they considered inferior in every way. Jace stood at the far end of the arena, his expression unreadable. The crowd buzzed with excitement, their voices rising in a chaotic symphony of anticipation. The human warrior seemed unfazed, as if the pressure of the moment meant nothing to him. He stood there, hands at his sides, waiting for the signal to begin. Thraxos, on the other hand, was a vision of strength and pride. His armor gleamed under the twin suns of Liorna, and his eyes burned with the fire of a true warrior. He did not see Jace as a challenge. He saw him as an obstacle, a small, insignificant creature who had no place in the arena. It was clear in the way he looked at Jace, sizing him up as if he were nothing more than an insect to be crushed. Ilaria could see the smirk on Thraxos's face as he moved into position. He was confident, almost to the point of arrogance. She could feel the cold grip of worry tighten around her chest. She had never felt this way before. She had always believed in the strength of her people, but now, with Jace standing across from their champion, she found herself questioning everything. Her father, King Aris, stood beside her, his face hard as stone. He watched the arena with unwavering focus, as if he could already see the outcome. To him, Jace's victory in the previous rounds had been nothing more than a fluke. The human had outsmarted his opponents, yes, but Thraxos was not someone who could be beaten by trickery. The prince's strength was unmatched, and his skill in battle had been honed over countless years of training. Ilaria had no doubt that Jace's strategy was sound. She had seen how he could turn even the most difficult situations to his advantage. But Thraxos was a different kind of opponent. He wasn't someone who could be outwitted or outlasted. He would come for Jace with everything he had, and she feared that Jace, despite his cleverness, would not survive the onslaught. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, calling for the final match to begin. The crowd's cheers erupted into deafening roars as Jace and Thraxos squared off. The tension was unbearable. Ilaria's fingers gripped the railing in front of her as her gaze never left Jace. She wanted to believe in him, wanted to hope that he could somehow overcome the odds, but deep down, she knew that this battle was unlike anything he had faced before. The signal was given. Thraxos charged first, his massive frame hurtling across the sand with terrifying speed. Jace, however, did not flinch. He moved to the side with a fluid motion, his footwork precise. Thraxos's great sword missed by mere inches as Jace ducked under the swing. The crowd gasped in surprise. It was clear that Jace was not simply relying on strength, but on speed and agility. The battle continued in a blur of movement. Thraxos's strikes were powerful, each one capable of ending the fight in a single blow, but Jace was fast. He darted and weaved, using his small size to his advantage. Ilaria's heart pounded in her chest as she watched him move with incredible speed, his body almost a blur as he avoided the devastating blows from the giant prince. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The human was not just fighting for survival, he was fighting to prove something. Thraxos growled in frustration, his strikes growing wilder with each miss. His pride was being tested. He was not used to being outmatched, even in agility. But Jace was relentless, using his quick thinking to counter every move the prince made. At one point, Jace jumped onto a nearby pillar, narrowly avoiding a crushing blow, then flipped off the pillar to land directly behind Thraxos, catching him off guard. The crowd was in shock. They had never seen anything like this. The mighty Thraxos, the champion of Liorna, was being outmaneuvered by a human. It was unthinkable. Ilaria, for the first time, felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps Jace had something the Althorians had forgotten: resourcefulness, the ability to think on his feet, to adapt and overcome in the face of overwhelming odds. But even as Jace fought with everything he had, Ilaria knew the battle was not yet won. Thraxos, despite his frustration, was still the strongest. He was still the Prince of Liorna, and his strength was something that Jace could not match. With a roar of fury, Thraxos launched himself at Jace again, his sword raised high. The blow came down fast, and this time Jace wasn't fast enough to dodge. He leaped to the side, but the sword grazed his shoulder, sending him tumbling to the ground. Ilaria's breath caught in her throat as she watched Jace struggle to regain his balance. The wound was deep and blood began to stain his tunic, but Jace didn't give up. Even with the wound, he got back up, determination in his eyes. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human warrior, bloodied and bruised, faced Thraxos once more. Ilaria could hardly bear to watch. She wanted to scream, to beg him to stop, to somehow spare himself from the inevitable. She didn't know why she cared so much. He was just a human, an outsider, a warrior who had no place in their world. But somehow she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a fight. This was a test of something greater, something beyond the strength of the body. Jace stood tall, despite the pain, despite the blood dripping down his side. His eyes locked onto Thraxos with unwavering focus. He was not fighting for glory or fame. He was fighting for something else, for a chance to show the Althorians what humans were truly capable of. And in that moment, Ilaria saw it, the spark of something that her people had forgotten. Thraxos raised his sword once more, ready to finish the fight. But Jace, with all the strength he could muster, launched himself at the prince, dodging his sword and striking with quick, precise punches. He didn't have the strength to match Thraxos, but he had the will to fight. With a final burst of energy, he landed a blow to Thraxos's chest, sending the prince staggering back. For a brief moment, there was silence, and then the crowd erupted into cheers. Jace Hale had done the impossible. He had faced the might of Thraxos, the champion of Liorna, and lived to tell the tale. Illyria's heart swelled with something she couldn't quite explain: pride, admiration, and a strange sense of awe. But even as the crowd celebrated, Illyria couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The battle may have been won, but what would come next? The cheering of the crowd echoed through the grand arena, filling every corner of the city of Liorna. Jace Hale, bloodied but unbroken, stood tall in the center of the arena, his chest rising and falling with every breath. Prince Thraxos, the mighty Althorian champion, lay on the ground, his massive body struggling to rise. The fight had been fierce, but Jace had done the impossible. He had faced Thraxos, outwitted him, and survived. The crowd was in shock. They had expected Thraxos to crush the human warrior in moments, but instead, Jace had held his ground and delivered a blow that no one had seen coming. The Althorians, who had long considered humans inferior, were now forced to see them in a new light. But as the cheers grew louder, Princess Illyria felt a storm of emotions inside her. She had watched the entire fight from the royal balcony, her heart pounding in her chest. She had feared for Jace's life, worried that he might not survive Thraxos's overwhelming strength. But now, as she looked at him standing victorious, something inside her had shifted. She had always believed that the Althorians were the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They had the strength, the intelligence, the technology, everything, it seemed, to ensure their supremacy. But Jace was different. He didn't fight for glory or power. He fought because he believed in something more, a deeper purpose. As the crowd continued to cheer, Illyria couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of pride and uncertainty. She had pleaded with her father, King Aris, to stop Jace from fighting in the first place, but now she saw that he was more than just a warrior. He was something else, something her people had forgotten. Illyria's father stood beside her, his gaze still fixed on the arena. His expression was unreadable, but his lips curled into a small smile. He was proud of the outcome, but there was something else in his eyes, something that made Illyria uneasy. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, the calculation of how Jace's victory could be used to strengthen their position in the galaxy. "Father," Illyria said softly, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "What does this mean for us, for Liorna?" King Aris turned to her, his eyes sharp. "It means that we have found an ally like no other. Jace Hale is a warrior unlike any we've seen. His strength lies not just in his combat skills, but in his ability to inspire. This is what we need. This is what will secure our future." Illyria nodded slowly, though her heart remained heavy. She had seen the way Jace had fought, the way he had chosen mercy over violence when he could have easily struck Thraxos down. It wasn't just his physical strength that had won the battle, it was his heart. And that heart, she feared, was something the Althorians might never fully understand. As the royal guards moved into the arena to escort Jace from the battlefield, the crowd began to quiet down. The cheers slowly faded, replaced by whispers. Illyria's mind was still racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jace's victory was only the beginning. There were still many questions that needed answers. Why had he come to Liorna in the first place? What was his true purpose here? The royal procession moved slowly through the streets, with Jace walking at the head, his steps steady despite his injuries. Illyria followed closely behind, her father at her side. As they made their way through the city, the people watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Jace was no longer just a human warrior. He was a symbol of something more. When they reached the royal palace, Illyria was relieved to finally be out of the spotlight. The palace was quieter than the streets, and for a brief moment, she felt a sense of peace. But that peace was short-lived. As soon as they entered the palace, her father turned to her, his expression serious. "Illyria," he began, "we need to talk. Jace's victory changes everything. We can no longer afford to ignore the power that humanity holds. It is clear that the humans are more than we have given them credit for." Illyria opened her mouth to respond, but her father held up a hand. "I know you are concerned. You've seen the fight, and I know you have doubts, but we must be practical. This alliance, this human warrior, could be the key to securing our future. The galaxy is changing, and we must adapt if we are to survive." Illyria's heart sank. She had hoped that her father would see the danger in this. She had hoped that he would understand the value of what Jace had done, his courage, his compassion, his willingness to show mercy. But it seemed that her father saw only one thing: power. "I understand, father," she said quietly, her voice tight with restraint. "But at what cost? What kind of alliance are we forming? If we stand by Jace now, what will it mean for our people in the long run? Will we lose what makes us all Thorian?" King Aris looked at her for a long moment, his gaze heavy. "We will not lose who we are, but we cannot afford to be stagnant. We must evolve. If the humans have something to offer us, we must take it. And if Jace is the key to unlocking that potential, then we will stand beside him." Illyria's chest tightened with worry. She had always trusted her father's judgment, but now she wasn't so sure. She had seen Jace's strength, yes, but she had also seen the way he treated life, how he valued mercy over death, compassion over conquest. The Althorians had always believed that power was the ultimate goal, but Jace had proven that there was something else worth fighting for. The next few days were a blur for Illyria. The news of Jace's victory spread quickly across Liorna, and soon, word of the human warrior's prowess reached every corner of the empire. It wasn't long before the royal court began to discuss the potential of forming an alliance with humanity. King Aris, true to his word, moved swiftly to solidify the partnership, seeing it as a way to strengthen their position in the galaxy. But Illyria couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing in ways that couldn't be undone. The Althorians had always prided themselves on their strength and their control over the galaxy, but Jace's victory had shown her that strength could be more than just physical. It could be about something deeper, something more human. One evening, as Illyria sat in her private chambers contemplating the future, she heard a knock on the door. It was Jace. He had come to speak with her, to thank her for the support she had shown him during the fight. When she opened the door, she found him standing there, looking as calm as ever despite the wounds from the battle. He smiled slightly, though his eyes held a depth that Illyria couldn't quite place. "Princess Illyria," Jace said quietly, "I know this must be difficult for you. You've seen what happened in the arena, but I know it's not easy to accept what I represent. I'm not like your people. I don't fight for glory or power. I fight for something else, for the people I care about, for the world I come from. I just wanted you to know that." Illyria didn't know what to say. She had seen the warrior, the fighter, in Jace, but she hadn't seen the man. Now, as she looked into his eyes, she saw something else, something far more complex. He wasn't just a human warrior. He was a man who had faced a harsh world and had come out stronger because of it. And yet, there was still something gentle about him, something that set him apart from the warriors she had known all her life. "Thank you, Jace," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I can see now that you're not what I thought you were. You have. Something that my people have forgotten." Jace's smile grew slightly, but he said nothing more. He didn't need to. In that moment, they both understood something that neither of them could put into words. The future of Liorna was uncertain, but one thing was clear: everything had changed. And no matter what happened next, Jace Hale had already shown them all the true meaning of strength. Days passed quickly after the fight, and the city of Liorna had not returned to its usual quiet pace. The streets were alive with conversations about Jace Hale and his remarkable victory in the arena. For the first time in generations, the Althorians were facing a reality they had never imagined: that someone, something, other than themselves might be just as strong, if not stronger. Princess Illyria spent her days deep in thought, walking the royal gardens and speaking with her father, King Aris, about the future of Liorna. Though she had pleaded with him to reconsider his decision about forming an alliance with the humans, she could see that the king was fully committed to his plan. It was clear that the victory in the arena had changed everything for her people. The old ways were no longer enough to protect them, but Illyria couldn't stop questioning whether the changes her father was so eager to embrace would come at a price. She couldn't help but think about Jace. Since that day, she had spent little time with him, but her mind always returned to him. His quiet strength, his mercy in battle, the way he had chosen not to kill Thraxos despite the prince's attempts to destroy him, all of it had left a lasting impression. Jace was not like the Althorians. He wasn't proud or arrogant, and he didn't view power in the same way they did. To him, it wasn't about domination. It was about survival, protecting those he cared about. He had shown mercy, something the Althorians had long abandoned in their pursuit of glory. As she walked through the palace halls, Ilaria saw the council of ministers gathered in the great chamber. Her father was already in the room, sitting at the head of the long table, his advisors around him. Ilaria's heart sank as she took her seat next to him. She had always trusted her father, but now she wasn't so sure. The alliance with the humans was moving forward too quickly, and she feared they were rushing into something they didn't fully understand. "Ilaria," King Aris said, his voice steady and commanding, "we must begin preparations for the formal alliance. The humans have offered their strength in return for our support. It is time to move forward." Ilaria tried to mask the worry in her eyes, but it was difficult. She had never seen her father so eager, so focused on the potential power Jace and the humans represented. "Father, I understand, but I still don't fully trust them. Jace, he is different. I'm not sure we know enough about them to make such an important decision." King Aris's expression softened for a moment, but his voice remained firm. "You must learn to see things differently, my daughter. We cannot afford to be narrow-minded. Our people have become too isolated, too proud. Jace and his kind may be what we need to ensure our survival. If they are truly as strong as he showed us, they could be a valuable ally in the coming years." "But what about the way they fight?" Ilaria asked. "Jace showed us something I didn't expect. He didn't fight with pride, he fought with purpose. And that purpose, it wasn't for conquest. It was for survival, for protecting what he believes in. Will we lose that? Will we become like the very enemies we've fought against in the past?" Her father's eyes softened as he looked at her, but his voice remained unchanged. "Ilaria, you must learn to embrace change. You are right about Jace. He is not like us. But that does not make him weak. The humans may value different things, but they are still strong. We cannot afford to ignore strength, no matter where it comes from." Ilaria sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of her father's words. She could see that he was determined, and in a way, she understood. The Althorians had been strong for so long, but the galaxy was changing, and they could not afford to be left behind. She had known that even before Jace entered the arena, but something inside her still made her question whether aligning with the humans was the right path. Later that evening, as the stars began to twinkle above the city, Ilaria found herself alone in the royal garden. The soft hum of the palace was quiet now, and the night air was cool. She had come here many times before to think and find peace when the weight of her duties became too much to bear. But tonight, her thoughts were clouded. Her mind kept returning to Jace and the strange connection she felt toward him. She had seen his strength, his determination. But more than that, she had seen his kindness. When he had faced Thraxos, he could have ended the fight in a brutal way, but he had chosen mercy instead. That choice had stayed with her. In her world, where power and strength were everything, it seemed almost alien. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Jace's way might be what the galaxy needed now more than ever. As she walked along the stone path, her mind still heavy, she suddenly heard footsteps behind her. She turned, surprised to see Jace standing there. He had come to the palace earlier in the day to speak with her father, and she hadn't expected to see him again so soon. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Princess," Jace said, his voice as calm and steady as ever. "I just wanted to thank you again for your support. You didn't have to stand by me in the arena, and I appreciate it more than you know." Ilaria smiled, but her heart was still uncertain. "You fought well, Jace. I didn't know what to expect from you. I thought the humans were just warriors, but you're more than that. She paused, trying to find the right words. "You're different." Jace stepped closer, his gaze steady as he met her eyes. "I'm just a man who wants to protect what's important to him. I don't fight for glory. I fight for the people I care about, that's all." Ilaria nodded slowly. "I understand that now, but I still don't know what to think about everything. My father, he wants to form an alliance with your people, but I'm not sure if it's the right choice. The Althorians are used to power, to domination. We've built an empire on strength. But you fight for something different. Will we lose our way if we follow your example?" Jace's expression softened, and he took a step closer, though he kept a respectful distance. "I can't speak for your people, Princess. I don't know what the future holds for Liorna, but I do know that strength isn't just about power. It's about the choices we make. And if we choose to fight for something bigger than ourselves, then maybe we can all find a way to survive together." Ilaria felt something stir inside her. Jace's words were simple, but they resonated deeply within her. She had spent her whole life surrounded by the idea that strength meant domination, that power was everything. But Jace was showing her another path, a path where strength didn't have to mean destruction. It could mean protection, compassion, and unity. I wish I could be sure, Ilaria whispered, her voice filled with doubt. I wish I knew if this was the right choice. Jace took a step forward, his voice gentle. No one can ever be sure, but sometimes the right choice is the one that doesn't make sense at first. The one that challenges everything you've ever believed. And maybe that's what this alliance could be. A challenge to the way things have always been, and sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Ilaria felt a lump form in her throat. She had never been so confused, so torn between duty and what felt right. She had always been certain about the way things should be, about the strength of her people and their place in the galaxy. But now, Jace's words were making her question everything. I don't know what's going to happen next, Ilaria said quietly, but I think I want to understand more about you, about your people, and about the way you fight. Jace smiled, his eyes kind and understanding. I'd be happy to show you, Princess. There's more to humanity than what you've seen in the arena. As they stood there, the night sky above them filled with stars, Ilaria felt a sense of uncertainty, but also something else. Hope. The future of Liorna was uncertain, but perhaps, just perhaps, this human warrior had shown her a way forward. A way that didn't rely on power and domination, but on something more important. The days after their conversation seemed to pass in a blur for Princess Ilaria. She spent most of her time walking the halls of the royal palace, lost in thought. The quiet peace of the royal gardens no longer brought her comfort. Instead, her mind was filled with questions about the future, about Jace, and about the path her father had chosen for Liorna. She still had doubts, but something in her heart told her that the changes happening in her world were more important than she had realized. Jace Hale had become more than just a warrior to her. He was a symbol of something new, something her people had never considered. He had shown her that strength was not always about domination or pride. It was about purpose, about protecting what mattered most, about fighting for something greater than oneself. His actions in the arena had proven that. And yet, the question still lingered in Ilaria's mind. Could the Althorians learn to embrace this new way of thinking, or would they resist it, as they always had with everything different? King Aris had not slowed his plans for the alliance with humanity. He was determined to forge a partnership with Jace's people, and the formal ceremony to seal the alliance was fast approaching. The ministers and military advisors had already begun discussing the terms of the agreement, and soon, the human delegation would be arriving in Liorna to formalize everything. Ilaria knew that once this alliance was signed, there would be no going back. The future of her people, the future of Liorna, would change forever. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that change might not be as terrifying as she had once believed. It might even be the thing that saved them. One evening, as the ceremony drew closer, Ilaria found herself alone again in the garden. The sky was dark, the stars barely visible behind a thin layer of clouds. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the soft hum of the palace seemed distant. She had always found solace here, but tonight the garden felt different. It felt like a place where decisions would be made, where the future would unfold. She wasn't surprised when she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to see Jace walking toward her, his expression as calm and steady as always. There was something about him that made Ilaria feel at ease, despite the uncertainty swirling in her mind. "Princess," Jace said quietly, bowing his head slightly as he stopped in front of her. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Ilaria smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You're not disturbing me. I've been thinking a lot lately." Jace's eyes softened with understanding. "I know how that feels. It's not easy, is it? Trying to figure out what's right in the middle of so many changes." Ilaria nodded. "I'm not sure what's right anymore. My father is set on this alliance, but it feels like we're rushing into something we don't fully understand. You and your people are different. I don't know if I can fully trust that this will be good for Liorna." Jace took a step closer, but not too close. He respected her space just as he always had. "I don't want to force you into anything, Princess. I never wanted to make you feel like you had no choice. But sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to see. I don't know what your father sees in me, but I can tell you this. We are not the same. The humans are not the same as your people, but that doesn't mean we're your enemy." Ilaria looked down at the ground, her fingers gently tracing the edge of a stone path. "I know that. I've seen it. You fought with mercy, not cruelty. You fought for survival, not conquest. I've never seen that before in anyone from Liorna." Jace smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. It's not something everyone understands, but for humans, it's how we survive. We don't have the power or the luxury to rely on brute strength alone. We have to think smarter, we have to work together. That's how we've gotten as far as we have. Ilaria felt a strange warmth in her chest at his words. She had always believed that strength was everything, that power, speed, and victory in battle were the things that determined who survived. But Jace was showing her that there was more to life than just fighting for dominance. There was another way, a way of thinking that was foreign to the Althorians but might just be the key to their survival. "I don't know if I'm ready to fully accept what my father wants," Ilaria said, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But I can't ignore what you've shown me. Maybe there's something worth exploring in your way. Maybe it's not just about fighting. Maybe it's about something deeper, something we've forgotten." Jace took a deep breath and looked up at the stars. "I can't promise you that everything will be easy. I can't promise you that there won't be hardships. But what I can promise is that the humans will fight beside you. We'll fight for what's right, for what's worth protecting. And maybe that's the beginning of something better for everyone." Ilaria stood in silence for a long moment, looking out at the vastness of the stars. She had always thought of herself as a protector of her people, but now she was starting to see that protection didn't always mean using strength to control others. It meant standing by those who needed help, those who couldn't fight for themselves, and finding a way to work together toward a common goal. Finally, she turned to Jace, her voice steady. "I've seen the way you fight, Jace. I've seen the way you think, and I think you're right. The future is uncertain, but maybe we should try to walk it together, not as enemies, but as allies." Jace's eyes brightened, a look of genuine relief crossing his face. "Thank you, Princess. That means more than you know. We may be different, but I believe we can make this work. Together." As they stood there in the quiet garden, the weight of the future hung between them, but there was no fear in the air, only a sense of possibility. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ilaria felt as if something new was beginning. Maybe it was the start of a new chapter for Liorna, a chapter where mercy and strength could coexist, where the old ways could be replaced by something better, something more inclusive. The days leading up to the formal signing of the alliance passed quickly. King Aris, though still determined to push forward with the agreement, had started to notice the subtle changes in his daughter. She was no longer the princess who feared change. She was beginning to see the value in working with others, even those who were different from her own people. When the day of the ceremony finally arrived, the entire royal court was filled with anticipation. The grand hall was decorated with banners and symbols of both the Althorians and the humans, marking the significance of the event. Jace stood at the front, his posture straight and dignified, while Princess Ilaria stood beside him. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, knowing that this was the beginning of something important. King Aris entered the hall with the ministers and officials by his side. He looked at the gathered crowd, his expression proud yet thoughtful. It was clear that he saw this alliance as a means of ensuring Liorna's future, but Ilaria could tell that even he had started to realize that this was not just about power. This was about survival, about understanding, and about learning to work together in a way that Liorna had never done before. The ceremony began with formal words of alliance, promises of support, and the signing of agreements. Ilaria watched as her father and Jace exchanged words, and she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of hope. The future was uncertain, yes, but maybe it didn't have to be shaped by the old ways of violence and pride. Maybe, just maybe, this new alliance would be the key to something better, something more enduring. When it was time for her to speak, Ilaria stood before the crowd, her heart calm despite the weight of the moment. She turned to Jace, her gaze meeting his. "We may be different," she said, her voice steady, "but today we begin something new. An alliance built not just on power, but on understanding. We will fight together, not as separate peoples, but as one. I believe that this is the way forward for Liorna." The room fell silent, the significance of her words sinking in. And in that moment, Ilaria knew that the future of Liorna would not be decided by force or by fear, but by the strength they could build together.